let me just start introducing some of the folks who are going to join us, and then we'll have a sit down and have a conversation. Charlie Wessler and Jim Burke, who are producers of the film, welcome. The music is just terrific in this film. Please join me in welcoming the composer, Kris Bowers. One of the writers of the film, with Nick and Peter, Mr. Brian Currie. Brian, welcome. And a writer whose name you're going to recognize, if you just, Mr. Nick Vallelonga. All right, this duo did such a great job together on this film. Let's bring them down. Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali. Welcome back. Great to see you. Welcome back.
Absolutely,
Producer, co-writer, director of the film, Mr. Peter Farrelly. First of all, again, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to give the audience a chance to ask some questions in a minute, but I'm going to get us started. I would love to, Peter, maybe you could start and with your co-writers and producers, give us a little bit of a foundation for how this project came about. And let me actually ask the audience, how many people here had actually heard of the Green Book before? Okay, so some people had, some people had not.
Is that the movie or Green Book?
Sorry, the actual book.
The actual Green Book, say, before this movie? Oh, wow, good.
So maybe that's a way to start. Give us a sense of how the film came
Well,
about.
I had never heard of the Green Book until we were researching this movie. But basically what happened is, you know, I ran into Brian Hayes Currie, and about 3 years ago, and just bumped into him, and he told me he's doing a screenplay, and he told me this story. It was a black concert pianist named Don Shirley who had to go in the South, and he hired a bouncer from the Copacabana in New York who was racist himself to drive him, and somehow after that trip they became lifelong friends, and I was like, you gotta be shitting me. How do I get in? And I basically, you know, they hadn't started writing the script, so I asked, can I do this with you? I love this idea. And dove in, and during the course of it, we had hours of audio tape from the real Tony Lip that Nick had the brains to get 25 years ago. And we had a lot to draw from, the letters, stuff like that. We'll get into that later. But anyway, along the way, at one point, we were listening to the audio tape, and it's probably the fourth time I've been through it, and Tony Lip says, yeah, and then they gave us the book for the, you know, where the black people could stay. And I was like, what is that? What is he talking about? And we Googled it and looked it up, and we found out about what is called the Negro Motorist Green Book. And it was an eye-opener, and everybody I asked, nobody had heard of it. And of my black friends, I would say 8 out of 10 hadn't heard of it. So it was just something that really interested us. But, you know, that isn't the story. The story is about these two guys mainly, and that's how it got started.
So maybe Brian and Nick, you could flesh that out a little bit and kind of add some context to what Peter's talking about and tell us about kind of the same question.
Nicky, why don't you give that a shot?
Hello. Yeah, I obviously lived this, and I knew this story when I was a kid, and I met Dr. Shirley when I was 5, and actually went to Carnegie Hall to his apartment. He let me sit on the throne. And so it was in my head forever, and then when I got old enough and I realized I wanted to, you know, maybe make film, I started talking to my father about it more in detail, and then I started tape recording him. And then when I got real serious in my 20s, which was a long time ago, my father said to me, well, if you're going to get serious, we have to talk to Dr. Shirley and get his permission and get his side of the story, which I did. So it took a long time to do it for various reasons, but I think the thing about this is that it was a true story, such an amazing true story, that I didn't have to embellish or add anything. There was enough there to tell the story, which is, I think is incredible about these two guys. Including, when I got real serious, my mother pulled me aside and said, "You gonna do that movie?" And I said, "Yes." She pulled me into their bedroom and opened up a bottom drawer, and she had all the letters saved that my father sent her, which was beautiful and invaluable because it added so much to it. It also had the postmarks from where they were, and then you could see my father changing and what he was talking about, and how he was hesitant at first, and then how he became to really respect and love Dr. Shirley, and also then how the letters got better and better along the way. But that was an invaluable thing. So all that combined, when I was finally ready to do it, but they both passed away in 2013, I was going to do it myself. I was going to maybe even direct it, maybe a small, low-budget movie. I figured I'll make it with my iPhone and a couple of meatball sandwiches. But then I thought, well, maybe I should bring in another voice, to help me write it. It might be better. And so I brought in Brian, and then, as Pete said, Brian brought it to Pete. And I met Pete, and I knew immediately we got to bring Pete on and have Pete direct. And he did a brilliant, amazing job with this, and I couldn't be more proud of it.
Nick, how did your dad feel about sharing this story with you? Was he comfortable kind of going back and reliving what we would eventually see on this movie, the arc of the movie, the context? What kind of conversations did you have to flesh it out? And was he comfortable with that process? And also, what surprised you about those conversations?
Well, as you can see, my father didn't have a hard time talking, so he had no problem telling me the stories. And he did say to me, "I want you to tell this, whatever I did or whatever I was before, you have to put all that in. You have to, because it's important." So he was right up front with everything that he told me, and there were things I remembered, but there were things I didn't remember that he told me about himself as well. And then same with Dr. Shirley. I mean, Dr. Shirley is the brilliant man and beautiful man that he was. He had some warts too. They both had some issues. And he said the same thing. He goes, "I want you to tell exactly what I tell you and exactly what your father told you." He said, "Just do it, tell the truth." If you tell the truth, because then their friendship came about and the change in both of them. And it really was a massive change in my father, how he treated other people and how he brought us up to treat other people. My mom was like that anyway. My mom was the definitive Italian woman. She did the rosary, went to church every morning. So she was always that way, and she saw a great change in my father as well. So it changed how we were brought up and how we treated people. And Dr. Shirley had a change as well, but I think both of them together really affected each other's lives, as you could see, and they went on and they remained very, very close friends. And to the point, my father said, if Dr. Shirley says no about anything, you're not doing it. So, but Dr. Shirley, he did say, that was the why it took me so long. He said, "I want you to tell the truth, but I want you to wait till I'm gone, whenever that may be." Dr. Shirley said. So thankfully, he lived a long, healthy life. And but when he did pass, that's when I decided to go ahead and tell the story.
Thank you. Quickly, Jim and Charlie, obviously this became more than an iPhone movie. Certainly once Peter Farrelly gets involved. Maybe you could give us a little bit of context to sort of flesh out that side of it, taking what could have been an indie film made on a different scale, and Peter gets involved, the scale grows. Maybe offer some context for us and sort of putting this together from your perspective.
And Peter doesn't like it when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I've always believed in Peter Farrelly as a filmmaker, and I believe, I've loved Dumb and Dumber and starting with Dumb and Dumber and all of those, but I've also read him as a novelist, and I knew that he was capable of something a little bit more tonally complicated, and so I was thrilled to be a part of this. Not just, it started with Peter directing it, but then it became something else for me, and it becomes something else for me almost every week. I learned more about this movie and what's drawing me in towards it. And so, but for a long time, no offense, Nick and Viggo, but for a long time I was really drawn into the Dr. Shirley character because he's so enigmatic. But what you said, Nick, is that your dad's life changed after he met him. And I've had the occasion, and many of us had, to meet 5 or 6 other people that say the exact same thing. I have people that say, I was one person before I met Dr. Shirley, and I became a different person after that. And that's not to say that he was an easy person to get along with or anything like that. He was terribly, terribly complicated. But he made a big, big imprint on people's lives.
I want to ask Mahershala and Viggo about the work you do, and I'm not an actor, but I want to understand the work you do to craft a relationship that's going to not only go through an arc that we're all going to see, but so much of the movie is how each of you sees the other person, and also how the other person then responds to that. So maybe help us understand, those of us who aren't actors, help us understand the conversations that you have, either with the folks who wrote the film and lived it, with Peter, the director. Maybe help us understand how you get to that point.
I grew up playing sports, so I just always have appreciated collaboration, and I think with Viggo and I, it started with respect. Viggo, I, and Pete, and really, when we would be sitting around the table and perhaps we're speaking about something that has to do with Tony, but it's all of us chiming in, trying to get down to what the hiccup is in the scene, and vice versa. And so I just think I think it just started I think coming into it, I think it was really about having respect and coming into it very open, and being collaborative, and just trying to get down to the essence and root of these characters. And really being committed to doing everything that we could to lift them off the page, and always being conscious of the fact that we are in service of something greater than ourselves, of people who are no longer here to speak for themselves, and so therefore they are greater than us. And I think the rest of that was just doing the work that you have to do as an actor to, to really discover character and give yourself things that you could really sort of root yourself in, from understanding the psychology of a character to the physicality or the psychology that informs the physicality of the character, and just really just having those conversations, gathering as much information as you could, metabolizing that and throwing it away, and just being, at the end of the day. But I think it really just started with respect and an openness and a earnest energy towards being collaborative and generous.
Well, fortunately, we had met like over a year before we started shooting the movie. It was the year that Mahershala won a lot of awards for his role in Moonlight, and excellent work. And we met at an event, and we ended up talking. I think we were relieved to be in a corner talking for half an hour instead of like hobnobbing those 30 seconds. Hi, how you doing? And we got to know each other a little bit there, and I thought, well, what a cool guy, not just a great actor. And just it was a very nice conversation. And then when I got the part of Tony Lip, my first question after that, after I got up the courage to say yes, basically, to Pete Farrelly, because I was like, I don't know if I can do this guy. It was kind of scary. But then once I said yeah, which I'm glad I did, obviously, I said, so who's Doc Shirley? And he says, well, I'm going to meet with Mahershala Ali, and I'm hoping he'll do it. And I said, man, that would be incredible. I mean, you're going to like him just as a person, but obviously he's a great actor, and if he did it, that'd be in a piece of the puzzle. That would get us that much closer to making a movie as good as this amazing script you have. And fortunately, he did it. And like you said, before we started shooting, Pete was great. You know, with us, with everybody. He's always saying, I don't know everything. I have an idea of how I want to do this, but anything that can improve on it. We got one shot to make this story. It's a really great story, but we got to all pitch in. And he did that with us. He got us together, and we went through all of our scenes carefully over a couple of days, over and over. And just anything that didn't feel right, anything that was dissonant, anything that didn't feel true to either of our characters, it was up for discussion, and it was a great process. And so by the time we started shooting, you know, which was in the car, the first scene that we did in the car, we were already, I'd say we were pretty comfortable, and I think we both knew that, you know, that I was going to be listening to you and watching you, and you were going to be listening to me and watching me. That's like, if you got that with another actor, you're already a long ways ahead to feeling like you're not alone, and that something really good could happen. You know, the foundation of good acting is good reacting, and we were both into that, and that's the way it was. That's the way this movie was made in general. Everybody was into the story more than usual.
Let me just add one thing, because Viggo mentioned being in the car. The first week of the film, we didn't see each other, meaning Viggo was looking straight out the window with no rearview mirror because there's a camera there, and I'm just looking at the back of his head. So we had to listen on a deeper level in those early scenes, and then it was a week later we ended up actually getting to look at each other and have a conversation. I think it was maybe in the hotel or something like that, coming out of the
diner,
hotel.
maybe.
Or
Maybe it was the
diner,
orphans.
The diner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a great exercise. Because
You're right. It was a hotel.
The hotel.
Switching gears to a different part of the process, but a really important part to this story. It's a movie in part. It's a movie about a journey that's related to music, and one of the main characters is a musician. Kris, the compositions we hear in the film, I think, do such a great job of illuminating a moment and also enhancing some of these moments. But I wonder to what extent, or tell us about the conversations that you and Pete had, and also were you familiar with Dr. Shirley, and did any of what he achieved inform the kinds of conversations you were, or the kinds of ideas you had for how the movie would be composed?
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't heard of Dr. Shirley before this, and it was, you know, I was at first embarrassed to say I went to Juilliard for jazz piano, and I had never heard of him, and you know, it was such a gift to have to learn this music. And I remember, you know, when they asked me to come on board, I was incredibly excited, and then I listened to his music, and I was like, what did I get myself into? This stuff is really difficult, and I had to go through and transcribe it, and I was practicing like 8-9 hours a day to be able to get those recordings together. And but I was really inspired by how he combined not just classical music and jazz, but also his inspiration from like Negro spirituals and early gospel music and all of that. And when Pete and I talked about how do we differentiate the sound of Don Shirley's music with the score, we first talked about just having a different instrumentation. And so that's why most of the score is this orchestral sound. But in order to figure out how we could have the different sound but find some sort of way to tie it together, I was just doing a lot of thinking about Dr. Shirley and his influences and everything. And it reminded me of a story I actually heard when I was in school about Dvorak's New World Symphony. And the story is that he came to the States. He was brought to the States to teach at a conservatory in like the 1800s, and they brought him over to teach these students how to compose in the proper European style and orchestrate in the proper European style and everything. And I guess he had an African-American student while he was here who would sing to him, started to tell him about these Negro spiritual melodies and these old folk songs and these slave songs and all these different things. And the more he found out about that, the more he was interested in Native American songs and all this early folk music. And he eventually turned around to these teachers and said that he really hopes that the American sound will actually be developed from these native people or from these poor people or from these folk songs. That's what we do as European composers. Stravinsky, Dvorak, all these composers would pull from early folk music, and so he was saying that he would hope that Americans would do the same thing. And so kind of looking at the fact that Don Shirley himself was already doing that and creating this incredible music, I was then inspired with the score to try to figure out how to do that. And so a lot of the themes in the score first started off as like melodies that I figured out, and after like looking at all these folk melodies and Negro spiritual melodies, I just wrote all these melodies that I felt could function on their own as folk songs or folk melodies, and I could play them at the piano and play it like a Negro spiritual or play it like a gospel song or whatever. And then when we went to go actually start to put it to picture, orchestrate it in a way that was more inspired by some of Dr. Shirley's other inspirations, whether it be Ravel or Gershwin or Debussy or things like that. And so that's kind of how we figured out or how to have these two different sounds, but have it still have some sort of continuity and through line. Yeah.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, I grew up in the desert of Southern California, and in the early '80s, we did a road trip through the South, my family and I, and we had some interesting experiences that were surprising to a young kid. But I didn't know what a green book was until shortly thereafter. It would have been helpful, actually, on that trip if there was a green book for brown people, certainly. But you know, this movie opens up an opportunity for a conversation that can sometimes be difficult and challenging, but a conversation that's necessary, especially right now. There's a lot of division, there's a lot of confusion, and there's an intense sort of moment in how those conversations can be illuminated by the media. I wonder how any of you on this panel might want to talk about what you hope, what you aim, the conversation that this movie will open up, what you hope that conversation can do or offer. And anybody can
Well,
take this.
what I have to say is, the thing that got me involved, it wasn't that these guys were such opposites, though that was very interesting. It's that they somehow became friends after this trip. And that's what interested me. And what I'm hoping is when people see this movie, they realize that you could have complete opposites. These guys couldn't be more different. You got a black concert pianist with 3 doctorates and a say 6th grade educated bouncer who's racist. And these guys are stuck in a car together for these 2 months. And during that time, by talking, they end up cutting down walls, you know, knocking out preconceptions and opening their hearts to each other. And I want people to come out of this movie hopeful. I want you to walk out of here hopeful. I don't want you to walk out of here devastated. I want you to walk out feeling good about people and knowing that there is hope if people talk to each other.
Same question to anyone else who wants to take it.
I'll just say that you know, what's happening in our country now reminds me of what's going on in this movie, because you can just imagine yourself stuck in a car with your opposite, politically or something like that, and driving for 2 months. And how open might you be? Would you be as open as Tony Lip or Dr. Shirley? You know, I don't know. And I would like to think I would be, but boy, sometimes people say things in, you know, the political climate here that's pretty upsetting. And but it's call to action.
I've had some people say after seeing the movie, well, it's really disappointing that things haven't changed that much or enough since the Civil Rights Act, since, you know, the time of this movie when there were laws on the books, you know, sundown towns, colored only places, white only, you know, just the need for the Green Book, basically, for people to travel with it. That things haven't changed, you know, it's not just because you make a law or because people stop speaking in a certain way that things just magically change, you know, just because people stop saying certain things, at least out loud, unless they're, you know, a member of a hate group or something, doesn't mean that they don't carry inside them an animus, you know, racist thoughts or racist inclinations. It's something that every generation has to work on. I don't think it's massively disappointing or massively surprising that the problem doesn't quite go away. It's never really going to go away. It's something that you have to work on. Each generation has to work on, I think. Discrimination changes its face, changes its vocabulary, and the problem persists. It's something that each generation has to work on. And so is this movie really timely now? Yes. Yes, you know, in terms of human progress, it's not always like that or even like that. It's like up and down, sideways here. There. Right now, we're kind of like over there, I think, or over there. You know, we're certainly not right there in terms of public discourse or the lack of it. But, you know, this movie, if it came out 5 years ago or 10 years ago, 10 years from now, it would still be important. It would still be valuable, a little piece that can inspire people, like you said, to come out hopeful, come out with a little bit of faith or renewed faith in the possibility of making a little change, you know, just in how you treat somebody you meet after you walk out of the movie theater. It's that simple, you know. It's always timely. And if it's as well made, I mean, I'm biased, but if it's as well written and directed, if it's as beautiful, funny, entertaining, and profound a story as this, then it can also, as a movie, not just be a history lesson, a civics lesson, a cautionary tale, but it can be a classic. I mean, I think this movie, personally, I think this movie 5 years from now, 10 years from now, people will like say, yeah, let's watch that again. There's a lot of movies that come out in any given year that are successful box office and or critically, that people go, wow, that's one of the best movies this year. Did you see it? Yeah, no, yeah, it's really good. And then a year later, hey, let's put that on again. You want to see that? What else you got? You know, like maybe not. This one for sure, I think, for a lot of people. So.
I would just add that I think what I see in Doc Shirley and Tony Lip are two people who I think developed an awareness and were generous enough to choose to make those changes. And I think there's points in our society where we all put pressure on each other's communities or our neighbors. And you can pick and nitpick back and forth about what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate, but I think there's an opportunity for you as a neighbor to say, you know what, I'm aware that that is sensitive, and let me be generous enough to believe that person and operate differently moving forward. And we can do that as neighbors, as cities, as countries, as a world, where we work to educate ourselves, we work to listen, we are sensitive to other people's feelings, don't operate with any arrogance, and always hold our fellow human being as an equal and equally valuable. And therefore, I think a lot of things can kind of dissipate and fall by the wayside, and we can have better communication and better understanding. That's what I think the film offers in some aspect.
Can I just please, I want to say, this is a great honor to be here. You know, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I never have, before this movie, I've never been able to take my movie around to people who truly love film and discuss it with them, and it's just the greatest high of my career. So I'm so grateful for you all coming out tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations again to everyone.
Thank you.